Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We're going to be doing Daf Gimel and Shevuos. So we start from the Gemara 2 lines from the bottom. Beis Amud Beis. Michdi. Tana mimakas salik. The Tana just finished Makas. We just finished Masechta Makas. Like my heart is a little bit aching. Missed Masechta Makas. We invested 23 days there, but on we go. Question is, Maishna the Tani Shevuos. Why does the Tana put in the order of the Masechtas Shevuos after Makas? One of the last halachas in the Mishnayos we learned in Makas was not to cut the payas. Right? If somebody cuts the payas, he's chayiv twice, one for each side. Valazokin shtayim mikan shtayim mikan ve'achas malamata. And on the beard, he's chayiv 5 for the 5 spots on the face. And what do you see from here? That the Tana is busy with choda de mechayiv Allah tarti Tana Shevuos shtayim shen arba. Just like over there when we finished off the Masechta in Makas, we're talking about cases where there's one azhara, and on that azhara you can be chayiv a few times Malkus. So to over here, by Shevuos, we find a similar concept of Shevuos Shtayim that splits off, even though it's only 2 lavim that are mefurish in the Torah with regard to Shevuos, it splits into 4. So the Gemara asks, Maishna hacha de tani lulukulu, or Maishna gav yitzias Shabbos amaras negom de lektani lulukulu. When you open a Masechta Shabbos, you'll take a look. It says Yitzias Shabbos Shtayim Shen Arba, B'fnim and Shtayim Shen Arba B'chutz. It goes through Ketzad. Doesn't mention a whole list of places in Shas that we find the concept of Shtayim Shen Arba, and the same by Negoyim, right? One of the places the Mishnah mentioned was Negoyim. Maris Negoyim are Shnayim Shen Arba, and when you open Maseches Negoyim, and the Mishnah starts off with Maras Negoyim Shnayim Shen Arba, it doesn't mention every other case like we mentioned over here in Shevuos. So Maishna Achad the Tana L'Lakulu and Maishna Gabi Yitzias Shabbos Maras Negom did like Tana L'Lakulu. Why over there don't we mention the whole list, every place in Shas? Says the Gemara, answers the Gemara, Amri Shevuos v'Yediyos Atoma the Gaba Dodik Sivan. Shevuos, the halacha of Shevuos and the halacha of Yediyos Atoma. If you open a Torah, it's mamish next to each other in the psukim, the same parsha. V'damyin hadodi, and somebody who's over on those isurim b'shoigig, he's mechuyev b'karban oila v'yored. What's an oila v'yored? Oila v'yored is not a fixed carbon. Usually it's a fixed carbon. If you're chayiv a carbon, you have to bring. It's not a voluntary carbon, right? Voluntary, you can bring whatever you want, whatever you can afford, whatever you're noidiv. But if it's a obligatory carbon, you're mechuyev to bring it. Very few places do you have the option of an oil of year, which means it depends on your finances, right? If you're an owner, you can bring a cheaper carbon, and if you are an usher, you bring a more expensive carbon. So since that carbon oil of year is unique in these 2 cases, tanu l'gaba adadi. That's why when we mention one, we mention the other. If I did the tani tarti, and once the Tana mentions these 2, Tana kulu, the Tana mentions all 4 cases. Now the Gemara asks, okay, so now I know why we mention all the other cases of Shtayim Shen Arba. But Pasach b'Shevuos, your first opening line in the Masechtas, Shevuos Shtayim Shen Arba, right? And then when it comes to explaining the Mishnah runs to explain the second line before it explains the first line. Umafarish Yediyas Atoma. You first explain Yediyas Atoma. Make more sense if you give a whole list, right, of Shtayim Shen Arba, you start explaining one by one, taking it from the top, not from the second line. So why Pasach b'Shevuos Mefarish Yediyas Atoma? Says the Gemara, Aita the Zutra Milayu, Pasach Sharilahu, because Yediyas Atoma, relative to Hilchas Shevuos, there are not that many halachas. So the Tana prefers to get that out of the way first. Explain the few halachas of Yediyas Atoma, and then V'Hadur Tana Shevuos the Nefisha Milayu, and then we can get into Masechta Shevuos and learn a ganze Masechta, which is 49 blot. Says the Gemara. Shevuos Shtayim Shen Arba. Now we're going to explain what's the Shtayim Shen Arba. We explained it in the previous daf when we learned the Mishnah briefly, but here the Gemara is going to go through it quickly. Shevuos Shtayim Shen Arba. Shtayim She'oichel v'She'lo Yoichel. The two Shevuos that you're mechuyev v'karben and it's mefurish in the Torah are Shevuos lahaba. If you say I will eat, I will not eat. Shen Arba, the other two Shevuos bitoi that are not mefurish in the Torah, you learn from the Riboy, is achalti v'lo yachalti, v'shelo yachalti. That is, if you express and articulate the Shvuah in past tense, then you're chayev on that as well, but that's not mefurish, that's the Arba. Yediyas atom shtayim shen Arba, same idea. Shtayim yediyas tomas kodesh. If you knew that you became tomei, but you forgot that you became tomei and you ate basar kodesh, or yediyas tomas mikdash, or you knew that you were tomei and then you forgot you're tomei and you walked the Beis Hamikdash, those two cases are mefurish in the Torah. Shein Arba, but we learned from a drasha, from a riboy, another two cases, which is kodesh or mikdash, that you knew in the beginning that this basar is kodesh, but that you forgot about the basar that it's kodesh. In other words, you were aware the whole time that you were tamei. The gavras tamei was a shikha in the chefza, in the place, in the thing that you ate or in the place you walked into, a mikdash. That's learned from a drasha that even there you're chayev a carbon. Yetzias Shabbos Shtayim Shen Arba. What are the cases of Yetzias Shabbos that are two before the Torah that then are learned from a drasha? The other two that learn from a drasha. Shtayim b'tzah da'ani v'tzah da'balabayis. Tzah da'ani v'tzah da'balabayis. So Haitzah is one of the only two malachas that are before the Torah. By the way, it's interesting. Why is Haitzah? Why is Haitzah in Havara? Havara is the second malacha that's mefurish in the Torah. Why are those two malachas mefurish in the Torah? Very interesting. 39 malachas, Haitzah and Havara. So, just very quickly, very briefly, once we're talking about it, it's Erev Shabbos as I'm filming this, there are two words in Lashon HaKodesh for work. One is malacha, and the other is avodah. If you take a look at the shiur of each word, it's really stunning how they can both have the same translation. Malacha comes from the word melech, right? The shiur is melech, and avodah, the shiur is eved, a servant, a slave. How can they both mean work? And the answer is that there are two types of work. There's the malacha of a melech, and then there's the avodah of an eved. Eved, avodah means you're doing slave labor, right? Mamish, physical work, hard, physical labor. That's avodah. The Torah never says leisasu avodah, right? That's why I have a friend who was once staying in a hotel and he was schlepping up his stroller with his kids, like 8 flights of stairs, and somebody saw him and said, "Why don't you take the elevator?" And I told him, "Because it's my day of rest." And he's sweating buckets. The idea is, what's usher is avodah, not malacha. Malacha is creative work. You take 2 pieces of wood, 2 planks of wood, and you put it together, and you create something. The Rebbe Shalom didn't do avodah when he created the world. He did malacha, right? It's creative work. And so that's what's usher. What's interesting is, what's the most creative work? What's the most similar to Yesh Ma'ayin? Which malacha of the 39 malachas is most similar to Yesh Ma'ayin? Havara. You're mamash creating something from nothing. It's fire, right? Take 2 stones and something didn't exist before, it's created. What's the least creative malacha? Right? Actually, the Rishonim call it malacha grua. It's Haitzah. So the Torah mentions the 2 bookends of malacha. That's why Haitzah is also mefurish in the Torah. And Havara. And everything in between is learned from the Mishkan, obviously. But that's why Haitzah is mefurish in the Torah. But it's Haitzah mefurish, right? That's Haitzah. Now, there are 2 variations of Haitzah, which is mefurish in the Torah. We're talking about from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So the way to carry from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah can happen in one of 2 ways. Either I'm standing in Rosh Hashanah and I'm putting out a chayfetz into Rosh Hashanah, or a guy is standing in Rosh Hashanah, sticks his hand into Rosh Hashanah and takes it out. So those are the shtayim that are mefurish in the Torah.
Also, the only difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov is what?
Is derech nefesh.
Havara.
Oh wow!
You're allowed to carry on it.
Wow! And what do you say? Why is that?
Those are the 2. Those are the 2 malachas. Say that's a pshat. Why are those 2 malachas mentioned in the pasuk? Because those are the 2 that are machal.
Very interesting, Rocky. Very interesting. that the only two malachas that are different, is that really true? The only two malachas that are different with regard to, teichen, letzarech, eichel nefesh, are those the only two malachas?
I'm saying havara is koilel in achila in general, eichel nefesh.
Right?
Right? Havara sort of personifies eichel nefesh,
right.
cooking.
Right?
Visual, technically, right?
Right. Very interesting. Very interesting. Wow. So so that's the Hitzah by Shabbos. Is one of two ways. Yeah, if I'm standing Yochid, I'm putting it out, or I'm standing outside, I stick my hand in and I take it out. So Shehin Arba, that splits into four because we have toldas. The Achnosa is a tolda. Right? Make a joke in finances. Hitzah is the Av, and the Achnosa is the tolda. Achnosa is always less than the Hitzah. Achnosa, the Oni b'nachas, the Achnosa, the Balabais. Achnosa means putting from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah. So there are also two variations, same two variations. You can either stand in Rosh Hashanah and put it in, be machnas it into Rosh Hashanah. That's one way. Or you could stand in Rosh Hashanah, stick your hand out, and be machnas from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah, depending on where you are, your location. Okay, so those are the Yitzis Rab Shnayim Shenarba. Marois Nagoyim Shnayim Shenarba. Shnayim, what are the two others? Se'eis u'beheres. Shenarba, se'eis v'teladata. Beheres v'teladata, the told is not mafurish, and that's the Arba by Nagoyim. Now the Gemara asks a question. We're going to try to figure out, the Gemara does it very often. Try to figure out who is the Tana of our Mishnah. Try to identify the Tana. The Gemara does it usually when it has a question, like it can't find a Tana. And here, we have a big problem. Mani Masnisen, who's our Mishnah? Lo Rabbi Shmuel, v'lo Rabbi Akiva. Can't be Rabbi Shmuel, can't be Rabbi Akiva. I Rabbi Shmuel, ha'amar, eina chayiv, elala asid lavai. If it's Rabbi Shmuel, it can't be Rabbi Shmuel because one of the cases in our Mishnah is Shtayim Shen Arba by Shevuos. What are the Shtayim in Atayra? Lahaba, future tense. What is the Arba? What are the other two? Past tense. That can't be Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says, eina chayiv, elala asid lavai. He doesn't hold of Shevuos that you make in a lashon of ovar, of past tense, that you're chayiv on it. And our Mishnah says you are. So that cannot be reconciled with Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Rabbi Akiva, and if you're going to tell me that our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, ha'omar, halhelim tuma hu chayiv, he's chayiv on helim tuma. In other words, if he forgets that he's tameh, he forgets he's tameh, then he's chayiv to make a carbon oil of a yard. If he eats hektish, or he walks into the Azara while he is tameh and he forgot he's tameh, that's when he's chayiv a carbon oil of a yard. But if you knew you were tameh, and you walked into the Azara because you forgot that this is the Azara, or the Azara is Kodesh, you're not supposed to, or you didn't know that the Basar was Kodesh, there you don't bring carbon oil of the earth. Question is, our Mishnah says you do. Our Mishnah says, Shtayim Shen Arba, you do Shtayim Shen Arba, can it be Rabbi Akiva? So who is it? Not Rabbi Shmuel, not Rabbi Akiva. Says the Gemara, Ibai Seima, no. Rabbi Shmuel, Ibai Seima, Rabbi Akiva. Ibai Seima, Rabbi Shmuel can be both. Either can be Rabbi Shmuel, Mehen L'chiva, Mehen L'ptur. Are you going to tell me Rabbi Shmuel doesn't hold of Shavua L'sha'avar? So how can the Mishnah say Shtayim Shen Arba? Yeah, Shtayim Shen Arba, which means it's usher to do. You can't make you're not allowed to make the Shavua, but you're potter. You're not chayiv a carbon, right? Doesn't mean you have to be chayiv on the carbon. Shtayim Shen Arba it's not referring to the chi of carbon. It means it's usher. So it could be Rishmal by the same teretz to Bekiva. Mehen l'chiv, mehen l'ptur. That also by Yediyas Atoma. Even though you don't bring a carbon, if you forgot that this is the Azara or that the Basar is Kaidish, still it's Asr, and that's what the Mishnah means. Shtayim Shenar, but not l'chiv, but l'isr. Okay? Some are mechuyev and some are pater. Okay. So the Gemara says, Leptur, can you really establish the Mishnah that Shehein Arba by Tuma is pater from carbon, or the Shehein Arba by Shevuos is pater from carbon? Hadumya demaris negoim ketani. It has to be consistent with the case of Shnayim Shen Arba by Maris Negoim. Ma'asam kulo l'chiyuva, just like the case of Negoim, when the Mishnah Shnayim Shen Arba is all of them are chayiv, you chayiv in all of them. Afachanami, if they're mentioned in the same list, it's probably consistent here too. By Yediyas Atoma, by Shevuos, kul l'chiyuva, should be chayiv in all of them, not mehen l'chiv, mehen l'ptur. Says the Gemara, La'olam Rabbi Shmuel. I'll tell you, really, our Mishnah is Rabbi Shmuel. You'll ask me, Rabbi Shmuel? Shmuel says that on Shevuos that are articulated l'sha'avar, that's potter from a carbon. Says the Mishnah, says the Gemara, v'chila mechayev Rabbi Shmuel l'shav a carbon. Aval malchus chiv mechayev. No, you can still be chayev. If you do b'mezit, you're chayev. So Mela, that as long as you're chayev on malchus, that would still be consistent somewhat with negoyim, where it's kula l'chiyuva, and the Mishnah could be Rabbi Shmuel, the Chedirava. Now, how does he know you're chayev malchus? You're potef mekarbet chayev malchus if you make Shevuos l'sha'avar? Chedirava, the Omar Rava, befeirish ripsa Torah, Shevuos sheker dumya de Shevuos shav. It says by Shevuos shav, ki lo yenaka Hashem. Yeah. And we darshan that Hashem can't forgive you for a Shevuos shav. Hashem would lo yenaka. Well, bezdin malkin oisa menakan oisa. Hashem will cleanse you. Right? Bezdin, you get malchus for a Shevuos shav. Shevuos shav actually is very similar to a Shevuos sheker in the sense that they're both l'sha'avar. Because as soon as you, what is a Shevuos shav? We'll see later. A Shevuos shav is, if I say that this is not a Gemara, I swear this is not a Shevuos Gemara, this is a Basar Gemara. Right? That's a Shevuos shav. Right away, as soon as it comes out of my mouth, it's over. Avar. Okay? Pun intended. Unless you're saying the whole thing about that. So, in that sense, it's similar to a Shevuos sheker, which is also l'sha'avar, because as soon as you say, I swear I didn't eat, and you ate, you're already over the Isser of Shevuah right away. And in that pasuk of Shevuos shav, it says the word shav twice. It says, Lesisa Shem Hashem Elokecha Lashav, Ki lo yinaka Hashem Yisa Shema Lashav. So if we know you get malchus on a real Shevuos shav, right, on a classic Shevuos shav, which is when you say eitz is Evan or Evan is eitz. So from the second lashav, which is not necessary anymore, because I already have lashav once, so there's a concept of tneu inyan le'inyan acher. We learn that word for a different, similar case, which is Shevuos sheker of achalti v'lo yachalti, and that's how we know that just like lashav gets malchus, so too lasheker, which is learned from the second lashav, also gets malchus. That's how he knows it. Ma shav l'sha'avar, sheker now l'sha'avar, and therefore you get malchus on both cases of l'sha'avar, achalti v'lo yachalti. The Gemara is going to challenge this. Bishloima, achalti v'lo yachalti kedirava. Now I understand the chi of malchus l'sha'avar, whether it's achalti or lo yachalti, because it's learned from lashav. Okay, no problem. I also understand how you can get malchus on the case of shelo yochel, in a future tense Shevuah, when you say, I swear I won't eat v'ochal, and you violate that Shevuah by eating, nami lav sheyesh b'maisu. That I also understand, because it's a lav sheyesh b'maisu. You're violating the Shevuah with an act of eating. You said you're not going to eat. Elo oichel v'lo yochal. But if you swear that I'm going to eat, right, which is the second case, lehetiv, lahaba, of Shevuos bitoy, before Shna Torah. Elo oichel v'lo yochal, amai lav she'ein b'maisahu. If the chiyuv in the Mishnah, according to Mishmol, is not referring to karbonos of shaygig, it's referring to malchus. By malchus, there's a rule. You can't get malchus on lav she'ein b'maisa. And if you want to say that the Mishnah is talking about chiyuvei malchus, so you understand the sha'avar chalti v'lo yachalti, that's similar to Shevuos shav, and merely get malchus on both of those cases. And even in the case of lahaba, where you said loy oichel, you made a Shevuah loy oichel, and then you ate, that's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. But in a case where you said Shevuah sha'oichel, and you're not eating, so what are you doing? Nothing. You're sitting back, you're not eating. That's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. How could you get malchus? How can it be kula l'chiyuva of Shevuah shtayim shen arba on a case of Shevuah sha'oichel v'lo yachal? It's a lav sheyesh b'maisa.
Did not learn the last Masechta? It's the same rate we had at the beginning of Masechtas Malchus.
Uh-huh.
The Moiti Shemra. It's a lav shein by Maisa. You can't get Malchus. We said there's a shita that you could get Malchus by a lav shein by Maisa.
Okay.
They just forget about the.
Gewaldig. You macham the Gemara's teretz.
3 weeks ago.
Right. If the Gemara is asking, we just learned Malchus.
Right. Even more so, we just learned Malchus.
Excellent. Okay. Very good. Very good. It's for all those who don't do Daf Yomi. Right? And they're not aware of it. So like maybe some people jumped on to the daf right now. Right. So the Gemara is yeah. K'sover Rabbi Yishmael lav she'ein b'maisa loikan olav. Mamish what you said that Rabbi Yishmael will hold there is an opinion lav she'ein b'maisa loikan olav. Asks the Gemara, Ihachi. If so, Kasha de Rabbi Yochanan. Now we have a Kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. So far, Rabbi Yochanan's name has not been mentioned in Masechta Shevuos, right? In the last almost 2 blot. Now we're getting to Rabbi Yochanan. Heilig Rabbi Yochanan. The Omer Rabbi Yochanan. What's the contradiction? The Omer Rabbi Yochanan halacha kastam mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan always paskins like a stam mishnah. What's a stam mishnah? Our mishnah is a stam mishnah, right? Our mishnah is a stam mishnah, and our mishnah is saying lav she'ein boi ma'isa loikin olav. That's what you're saying in our mishnah, because the only way you can be mechuyev malchus on a Shevuos she'oichel v'lo yochal, which is lav she'ein boi ma'isa, is if you hold lav she'ein boi ma'isa loikin olav. So Rabbi Yochanan holds lav she'ein boi ma'isa loikin olav because he paskins like a stam mishnah. Our mishnah is stam mishnah. But kasha is v'itmar Shevuos she'oichel kikir zu hayoyim. Guy makes a shua, I'm going to eat this piece of bread today, and the day passes by and he didn't eat it. Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish, the Amri Tervayu, ain't I like it. Rabbi Yochanan Amri ain't I like it. Should have a lav she'ein boi ma'isa. V'chol lav she'ein ma'isa ain't like it olav. V'Reish Lakish ain't like Asra Safek. Give Asra Safek lishma Asra. We're not going to get involved in the whole sugi of Asra Safek. We had that in Makkas also. But the point over here is that you see Rabbi Yochanan himself says, in a case of Shevuos she'oichel v'lo yochal, he doesn't get malchus because it's a lav she'ein boi ma'isa. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say, look, it's our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says that lav she'ein boi ma'isa, in that same case, like in olav. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan stam achrina ashkach. Rabbi Yochanan found a different stam Mishnah. Oh, now Gemara is going to try to search through Kol HaTorah Kula Shas. Where else in Shas is there a stam Mishnah that says lav she'ein boi ma'isa ain't loikin olav? Because we have one stam mishnah in our mishnah, lav she'ein boi ma'isa loikin olav. Now we have to look for another stam mishnah. Hai stama, where is the stam mishnah? Ilai hai stama, maybe it's a stam mishnah. In Masechtas Pesachim, it says this nan avalam moisir betoher v'hashoiver betamei ein aloikas arboim. Somebody who leaves over from the basar of the carbon pesach, which has to be eaten until the morning. You go past the morning, you're over a lav. So over here we say you don't get malchus. Presumably, you know why? Because a lav she'ein boi ma'isa. What did you do? You just didn't eat it. You're supposed to eat the carbon pesach before morning. You didn't eat it. It's lav she'ein boi ma'isa. So you see clearly a stam mishnah lav she'ein boi ma'isa ain't like an olav. So the word is like this: Bishleim is shoiver betamei. I understand why. If you break a bone in a carbon pesach that became tamei, I understand why you don't get malchus. The word boy is extra. Bikasher v'loy b'pasul. It's a pasuk. It's a miyat. But somebody leaves over from the boss of the carbon pesach. My taima. Why shouldn't he get malchus? There's no miyat in the pasuk there. The only svara the Gemara can come up with at this point is lav mishem dahava lav shein b'maisa. It's because the lav shein b'maisa v'chol lav shein b'maisa ain't like an olav. Boom. Finished. So here you have another stam mishnah. So once you have 2 stammis, and Rabbi Yochanan halacha stam mishnah, he chose the stam mishnah of Pesachim, which says halacha halav she'ein b'maisa ain't like an olav. Gemara asks, slow down. How do you know that this mishnah is like Rabbi Yaakov? The Omer lav she'ein b'maisa ain't like an olav. How do you know the reason for noiser not getting malchus is like Rabbi Yaakov because of lav she'ein b'maisa? Dilma Rabbi Yehudi. Maybe it's because of Rabbi Yehuda. There's another reason why a noiser should not be getting malchus, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda says, that anytime you have a lav, hanitik la'aseh, you have a aseh that follows a lois aseh, which is in our case noiser, right? It says don't leave it over, but if you do, which is an aseh. So that lav hanitik la'aseh, the aseh is coming to repair the lav, and that's why you don't get malchus. But if not for the asay afterward, maybe you would get malchus and lav she'ein b'maisa like an olav. So you don't have a raya from that mishnah that lav she'ein b'maisa ain't like an olav from noiser, because maybe noiser, the reason why it doesn't get malchus is because it's a lav hanitik l'asay. The Tanya, now the Gemara is going to bring the machlikas of Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, l'sisir when ad b'ayke be'eish tesroifu bo ha'kosab l'tnasei acher lo yisasei lo ymer she'ein like an olav the Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says the reason why you don't get malchus is because you have an asay after the lois asay to repair the lois asay. It's a lav hanitik l'asay. Rabbi Yaakov Omer loy min Hashem uzeh. No, That's not the reason why you don't get malchus by noiser. Elam Hashem dav lav shein b'maisam, lav shein b'maisam, ein like an olive. So that is the rejection of that stama. Don't bring me the stam mishnah by noiser to prove that lav shein b'maisam ein like an olive. That's only according to Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yehuda has another pshat in that mishnah. Yeah, and that halacha of noiser. So what is the stama, the other stam mishnah that Rabbi Yochanan found that he based his psak, the lav shein b'maisam ein like an olive? He found a different stam mishnah. Shevuos shelo oichel kikar zu. So, later on, Nar Masechta, a guy makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat this piece of bread. Shevuos shelo yechlena, and he swears a second time on the same piece of bread. Va'achla, then he eats it. In a chayiv la'achas. He's only chayiv malchus once. And zuhi shevuas bito shechayovan al zdoina malchus va'al shegigasa carbon olavir. It's an emphasis in the Mishnah. Zuhi shevuas bito shechayovan. What this is the shevuas bito. What's zuhi? Techiyol zdoina malchus. What does it mean? Only this case. It means only the case of shevuas shelo yoichel, and then you ate it because then you did a ma'isa to violate the shevuah. You know what it's coming to exclude? Aval oichel. But if you made a shevuah that I'm gonna eat it, v'lo yochal, and he didn't end up eating a loy lucky because that's a lav she'ein b'maisa, and lav she'ein b'maisa ain't loiken olav, and that's where Rabbi Yochanan hung his hat on. That stam mishnah is mavur, not like our stam mishnah in the beginning, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan is justified, even with his klal of halacha stam mishnah, to paskin that lav she'ein b'maisa ain't loiken olav, because there's that stam mishnah that says that insinuates that. Asks the Gemara, okay, now you have two stam mishnayos that contradict each other. Michni, high stama, v'high stama. You have the first mishnah Shevuos, that is a stama that tells us that lav she'ein b'maisa like an olive. Shevuos shtayim shen arba. One of the cases of the arba is a guy makes a shevuah she'oichel and didn't eat it. That's lav she'ein b'maisa, and we're saying is like an olive. And you have another stam mishnah later on that says, no, the only time you get malchus is if you say Shevuah shelo yoichel and then you ate it because there's a ma'isa, not the other way around. So you have two stam mishnayos. My chazid ovid kihai. Why do you choose the mishnah from later, the stam mishnah from later? My chazid ovid kihai stam, ovid kihai stam. Let him do like our first mishnah, like a stam of our mishnah. Latamech, says the Gemara, Rabbi Gufay, Rabbi himself, who redacted the Mishnayos. He organized the Mishnayos. How could it be soisim, right? When Rebbe redacted the Mishnayos, how could it be soisim? Two Mishnayos with two opposite halachas. So the Gemara says, Elo meikara sovar la she'ein b'maisa like an olive. Must be in the beginning when Rebbe was Mesader the Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Shevuos. He held that lav she'ein b'maisa like an olive. He held like Rabbi Yehuda. The sasma, and then he gave us a stam mishnah like that. V'hoda savar ein like an olive. The sasma, and then later on he was chayzer. He retracted, and a mishnah loizaza memkaima. And once he already put the first mishnah in, he didn't want to take it out. So he left that one in, but then if a later Mishnah Rebbe will say some differently, that means Rebbe was chayzer, and the same way Rebbe was chayzer, Rabbi Yochanan paskind like the second stam Mishnah because of Rebbe's chazara. Okay, I'll see you Mir Hashem and Daf Dalet.